Number 5. Ariel Castro kidnappings.
You need police, fire, or ambulance.
I'm the police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here. I'm free now.
Okay, stay there with those neighbors. Talk to the police when they get there.
Okay.
And
I'm Amanda Berry. I've been on the news for the last 10 years.
In 2002, former school bus driver Ariel Castro abducted Michelle Knight, a 20-year-old woman, under the pretense of offering her a ride. Michelle was familiar with Castro as a family acquaintance, which made her feel safe accepting his invitation. However, instead of taking her to her intended destination, he drove her to his home, where he trapped her in a basement, locking the doors and subjecting her to physical and psychological abuse. 1 year later, in April 2003, Amanda Berry, a 16-year-old high school student, became the second victim of Ariel Castro. On the night of her abduction, she had just finished her shift at a fast food restaurant when Castro approached her in the parking lot. Claiming to be a friend of her family, he offered her a ride home. Trusting him, Amanda got into his vehicle, but instead of driving her home, Castro took her to his house. Once there, he assaulted her and locked her in a room where she would remain with Michelle. Gina DeJesus was the third victim of Ariel Castro, abducted on April 2, 2004, when she was just 14 years old. On her way home from school, she was approached by Castro, who offered her a ride, claiming to be a family friend. Gina got into his vehicle where Castro would once again take the girl to his house. The three women endured unimaginable suffering during their time with Castro. They were often kept in chains and faced physical and psychological abuse. Each woman was isolated from the outside world, living in constant fear. Michelle, in particular, faced the brunt of Castro's wrath and often endured the most severe treatment. The three women formed a bond during their captivity and supported each other. Castro maintained strict control over their movements and used threats and intimidation to ensure their compliance. He would sometimes pretend to leave the house or create situations where he would appear to be gone, likely to test whether the women would attempt to escape. Ariel Castro had a daughter with Amanda Berry during her captivity. Amanda gave birth to her daughter, named Jocelyn, in December 2006. The birth took place in a small, makeshift area within Castro's home. In May 2013, she managed to escape with her young daughter. She sought help from neighbors, leading to the police being alerted, which resulted in the rescue of Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus as well. Ariel Castro was arrested and charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and sexual assault. In August 2013, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Just a month later, he took his own life in prison. The house where Castro held the three women captive was demolished on August 7, 2013. The demolition occurred shortly after Castro was sentenced to life in prison for his crimes. Today, the three women, Michelle Knight, now known as Lily, Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, have each worked to rebuild their lives since their rescue in 2013. Number 4. Jaycee Dugard. Jaycee Dugard was abducted on June 10, 1991, at the age of 11 while walking to her school bus stop in South Lake Tahoe, California. Philip Garrido and his wife Nancy approached her in a car. He pulled up beside her and, under the pretense of offering her a ride, he persuaded her to get into the vehicle. Once inside, he used a stun gun to incapacitate her. He then took her to his home in Antioch, California. There, he kept her confined in a hidden area in the backyard, which included a soundproof tent and a shed. This secluded space was designed to prevent her from escaping and to isolate her from the outside world. During her captivity, Jaycee was subjected to severe abuse. He repeatedly assaulted her, and during this time she gave birth to 2 daughters, fathered by Garrido. Jaycee raised her daughters in the confines of the Garrido home, trying to provide them with a sense of normalcy despite their circumstances. Jaycee's discovery came in August 2009, when Philip Garrido took her and her children to a local school to enroll them. The school staff became suspicious of his behavior and contacted the authorities. When the police arrived, Jaycee revealed her identity, leading to her rescue and the arrest of Garrido and his wife. Jaycee would be 29 years old. Philip Garrido was subsequently charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and sexual assault. In 2011, he pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 431 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nancy Garrido was also charged and received a 36-year prison sentence. Jaycee has since become an advocate for missing persons and has shared her story in her memoir, A Stolen Life, emphasizing resilience and recovery. Number 3. Elizabeth Smart. In June 2002, at the age of 14, Elizabeth was kidnapped from her home in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was taken by Brian David Mitchell, a man who had been a family acquaintance, and his wife, Wanda Barzee. On the night of her abduction, Elizabeth was sleeping in her bedroom when Mitchell entered her home, threatened her with a knife, and forced her outside. He then took her to a remote area where he held her captive for 9 months. During this time, she was subjected to physical and sexual abuse. Elizabeth was often moved between different locations to avoid detection. Elizabeth Smart was discovered in March 2003 when she was walking with her captors, Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee, in a Salt Lake City neighborhood. A neighbor recognized her from the widely circulated missing person posters and immediately contacted the police. The neighbor approached Elizabeth and asked if she was indeed the missing girl. Elizabeth confirmed her identity, and the neighbor quickly called 911. Police arrived shortly thereafter and arrested Mitchell and Barzee, leading to Elizabeth's rescue. This moment marked the end of her 9-month ordeal and allowed her to return to her family. Brian David Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2011, after being found guilty of kidnapping and other charges related to the abduction. Wanda Barzee, who pleaded guilty to kidnapping and other charges, was sentenced to 15 years in prison in 2010. However, she was released in September 2018 after serving her sentence. Today, Elizabeth Smart is actively involved in advocacy work focused on issues related to missing persons, child safety, and victims of abuse. Number 2. Natascha Kampusch. Natascha Kampusch was abducted on March 2, 1998, at the age of 10 in Vienna, Austria. She was on her way to school when Wolfgang Priklopil, a 35-year-old man, kidnapped her. He approached her while she was walking, forced her into his car, and drove her to his home, where he kept her captive in a small, soundproof cellar. During her captivity, which lasted nearly 8 years, Natascha endured severe abuse and isolation. Priklopil exerted strict control over her, often moving her between different rooms to prevent her from escaping. Despite the traumatic conditions, she managed to maintain her will to survive and often sought ways to outsmart her captor. Natascha was discovered on August 23, 2006, when she escaped while Priklopil was distracted. She took the opportunity to flee when he left the house, managing to get outside and run to a nearby street. There she approached a passerby and asked for help, which led to the police being notified. Priklopil was arrested shortly after Natascha's escape, but he took his own life by jumping in front of a train when police approached him. After her rescue, Natascha Kampusch became an advocate for victims of similar crimes and published a book about her experiences titled 3,096 Days. Number 1. Carlina White. Carlina White was abducted as an infant in 1987 from a hospital in New York City. She was just 19 days old when a woman posing as a nurse kidnapped her from the maternity ward at Harlem Hospital. The woman, who was later identified as Ann Petway, took Carlina and raised her as her own daughter, naming her Nejdra Nance. Carlina was treated poorly by Petway, who was emotionally unstable and subjected her to various forms of abuse. While the specifics of Carlina's daily life varied, she faced a lack of stability and support, leading to feelings of confusion about her identity. As Carlina grew older, she began to suspect that her life was not as it seemed. In her teenage years, she started researching her past and ultimately contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In 2011, after conducting her own investigation and obtaining a birth certificate that raised questions about her identity, she underwent a DNA test that confirmed she was Carlina White. After her discovery was a significant moment, leading to a reunion with her biological family. Ann Petway was arrested and charged with kidnapping. In 2013, she pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 12 years in prison.